Okay, so a company famous for, launching rockets into space loses nearly $5 billion in a single year, and yet the market decides it is worth nearly $1.8 trillion.
Yeah, it's wild.
Right. Like, why? Because rockets are actually the least interesting thing they do right now. So let's unpack this. Welcome to today's deep dive. We are looking at a huge stack of reporting today from the Daily Tech Reader's June 7, 2026 edition.
Hmm.
And we are really exploring this massive, almost jarring friction playing out right now because we're stepping into a world where our digital future is accelerating at this unimaginable trillion-dollar speed.
Exactly.
While the physical reality on the ground, geopolitics, inflation, local community safety, it just feels incredibly heavy and constrained.
It really is the defining cognitive dissonance of this decade, I think. Because on one hand, you have these technological milestones just being shattered daily in these pristine, hypercooled data centers. But on the other hand, you have the physical world. Geography, limited resources, human conflict. And it's pushing back hard. So learning how to navigate the friction between those two realities is becoming, well, an essential survival skill.
So let's jump straight into that accelerating digital future because the numbers here are just staggering.
Oh, absolutely.
The SpaceX IPO roadshow opens on Monday. They are seeking a fully diluted valuation of $1.77 trillion, meaning, if you count every single stock option and restricted share out there, the total pie is valued at nearly $2 trillion.
Right.
They're offering $75 billion of that at $135 a share, and they're targeting a NASDAQ debut on June 12th. But, look at the financials. They reported 2025 revenue of $18.7 billion against a net loss of almost $5 billion.
Yeah, and to understand why the market is eagerly anticipating that valuation despite a massive net loss, you kind of have to look away from the stars.
Okay.
You have to look at the ground in Texas and Tennessee. Specifically, you have to look at the Colossus data centers.
Right. This is where the entire narrative pivots because Google just agreed to pay SpaceX $920 million every single month for access to 110,000 NVIDIA GPUs at their data center infrastructure.
Yeah, nearly $1 billion a month.
It's crazy. And that mirrors the deal from May where Anthropic agreed to pay SpaceX $1.25 billion a month. It's like SpaceX built the only digital transcontinental railroad, right? And now the biggest tech giants have to pay $1 billion a month just to run their trains on it. But wait, how does a company that built its reputation on physical engineering, literally launching things into orbit, suddenly become the toll booth for artificial intelligence?
Well, what's fascinating here is how the definition of infrastructure has completely shifted.
Yeah.
The AI revolution isn't happening in some invisible cloud.
Right.
It's happening in massive, physical, hyper-cooled warehouses that require more electricity than small nations.
Yeah.
SpaceX had the immense capital, the energy infrastructure, and the silicon pipeline to build the physical moat.
Wow.
They originally built these facilities for XAI, but now they are effectively the most powerful commercial landlords in the world. Goldman Sachs projects SpaceX's AI unit revenue is going to jump 388% in 2026 alone.
Because of the sheer scale of compute power required to reach the next generation of AI models.
Exactly. Decoupling software from human limits requires brute physical force. And the paradox here is just striking. Consider the physical cadence. SpaceX is on track for its 66th physical rocket launch of 2026 this week.
That's just this year.
Right. They've achieved 278 successful Falcon booster landings. That is an unparalleled mastery of physical engineering.
Yeah.
But concurrently, Anthropic engineers are reporting that their AI, Claude, is now writing the majority of the code produced at their company.
Wow. The software running our future is now actively authoring itself. Just think about that. Imagine your own work tools suddenly doing the heavy lifting of building the next smarter version of themselves.
It's a huge shift.
Right. You log in on a Monday and your software has already optimized the project you were planning to tackle. It completely decouples output from the traditional human workday. How does that change your daily grind?
And that decoupling is precisely why the valuation sits at $1.77 trillion. If an AI can write its own code, the bottleneck of human developer hours is removed.
Wow, yeah.
The only bottleneck left is the physical compute power, which brings us right back to why those data centers are worth billions a month.
But, when a single private company essentially controls the physical bottleneck of the global digital future and the software inside those walls is writing itself, governments aren't just going to sit by and watch the opening bell at the NASDAQ.
Oh, they absolutely will not.
Yeah.
And that reaction is already unfolding in Washington.
Yeah, we're seeing Senator Bernie Sanders introducing the American AI Sovereign Wealth Fund Act. The core proposal is that the federal government should take equity stakes in major AI companies. And before we go further, I have to state this clearly directly to you listening. We are not endorsing any political viewpoints here, left or right. We are strictly analyzing the factual content reported in the sources regarding these political movements.
Exactly. We're just looking at the mechanics of it.
Right, because setting aside partisan leanings, what do the mechanics of this proposed policy actually tell us about the tech landscape? Because the political alignment forming around this is wildly unexpected.
The alignment is perhaps the most revealing part of the story.
You have Magier conservatives who have historically been highly critical of big tech's influence and progressive critics who are sounding the alarm on corporate AI concentration, finding common ground against the current ownership structure of these AI labs.
It's very rare.
It's like finding out cats and dogs are teaming up to regulate the global kibble supply. But is this just political theater, or is there a genuine rethinking of how much power a private corporation should have over sovereign-level tech?
This raises an important question, right? Because this alignment reveals a universal societal anxiety that cuts right through traditional party lines. We are seeing a collective realization that artificial intelligence isn't just another consumer product or software service.
Yeah.
It is sovereign-level technology. When a private corporation holds the keys to software that iterates itself and dictates global compute power, nation-states begin to feel deeply insecure about who actually holds the reins of the future.
They feel threatened.
Exactly. The mechanics of a sovereign wealth fund suggest that the government views AI less like a tech startup and more like discovering a massive new oil reserve within your borders.
And speaking of oil reserves and national security, while politicians debate who controls the abstract wealth of the digital future, traditional nation-states are still violently contesting the physical fuel required to power the present.
Right. The geopolitical situation in the Gulf over the weekend is a stark reminder of that physical vulnerability.
Let's lay out the tactical facts from the Strait of Hormuz. CNE-Sham, the U.S. military command covering the Middle East, reported that U.S. forces intercepted 2 more Iranian one-way attack drones on Sunday. This marks the second consecutive day of drone launches threatening international maritime traffic. Now, unlike Saturday, where the U.S. conducted strikes on Sirak and Qeshm Island, there was no reported U.S. retaliatory strike on Sunday.
And that's significant. By not striking back on Sunday, the exchange moved one rung lower on the escalation ladder.
Okay, unpack that.
Well, in military terms, the escalation ladder is a calculated sequence of actions where each side either increases or decreases the intensity of force to signal their intentions, without triggering all-out war. Pausing retaliation is a mechanism to test if the other side is willing to de-escalate.
Right, even though the rhetoric surrounding it remains incredibly intense. Iran's foreign ministry claimed Saturday's U.S. strikes were a clear violation of the April 8th ceasefire. Meanwhile, President Trump pushed back against critics who cited his "No New Wars" campaign promise, stating that the U.S. actions over the weekend were strictly defensive in nature. And again, strictly reporting the facts of the exchange here, maintaining total neutrality.
Of course.
But the ripple effect is what really hits home. So what does this all mean? Retailers are reporting a very real consumer pullback on discretionary spending because Gulf War energy costs are squeezing household budgets despite a supposedly strong jobs market. It's like this butterfly effect.
It really is.
A drone launched over the Strait of Hormuz directly results in you, the listener, skipping a planned weekend purchase. But how does an economy boast a strong jobs market when nobody can afford to fill up their gas tank or buy groceries without wincing?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, it highlights the duality of modern economics. Macroeconomically, the data shows employment is holding steady. But microeconomically, at the level of the individual checking account, the consumer is feeling immense pressure.
It's just a constant squeeze.
Because geopolitical instability instantly weaponizes energy costs. And energy is the bedrock of everything physical. It doesn't matter if unemployment is low if the cost of logistics skyrockets.
Right.
When a drone disrupts shipping lanes in the Gulf, the cost of moving goods globally surges. That premium is passed directly to the consumer. A strong jobs market provides a baseline of income, but it offers zero protection from sudden cost of living spikes driven by overseas conflicts.
Yeah, domestic job security becomes practically invisible to a worker when the fundamental cost of simply moving through the physical world suddenly outpaces their paycheck.
Exactly.
And this squeeze on the individual isn't just economic. We're seeing physical manifestations of this tension between massive external forces and vulnerable communities all over the world. The sources today highlight two stories vastly different in scale, but the underlying fragility of the local space is identical.
The contrast between state-level infrastructure and local-level security is incredibly sharp here.
Right. On an international scale, the Indian government is advancing a massive $9 billion project to build a megaport, an international airport, and a planned city on a remote island.
A huge undertaking.
Massive. And it is drawing fierce criticism because it threatens pristine forests and the indigenous inhabitants who live there.
Yeah.
That is a macro-level disruption, a government bulldozing nature in the name of global supply chain dominance.
Correct.
But then you look locally, here in the U.S., in Toledo, Ohio, gunfire erupted near a busy community street fair by the Agnes Reynolds Jackson Arboretum. At least 12 people were wounded just trying to enjoy a Saturday festival.
It's tragic. And while the scales are worlds apart, synthesizing these two events brings us to a core tension of our era's security versus expansion.
Yeah.
In a world racing toward trillion-dollar digital futures and massive global megaprojects, the local physical community is often left exposed. An indigenous population facing the sudden arrival of an international airport is dealing with the sheer force of external state expansion.
Right.
A neighborhood in Ohio dealing with sudden violence at a community arboretum is dealing with the breakdown of fundamental local security. In both scenarios, the physical community bears the immediate brunt of systemic failures or pressures.
It just feels incredibly heavy when you stack the sheer velocity of AI disruption, the political anxiety over who controls it, kinetic conflict in the Middle East raising your gas prices, and the very real threats to community safety. It is a lot to process.
It is.
Which brings us to the most human reaction possible to all of this pressure.
Right, because when the macro environment feels too large, too fast, and too threatening to process, humans instinctively seek out shared physical experiences.
And here's where it gets really interesting. The data from this weekend shows humanity seeking that shared experience in absolute droves. Look at the sheer volume of people gathering. In Madrid, Pope Leo XIV drew 1.2 million people to Plaza de Cibeles for a Corpus Christi Mass.
Wow.
It's the first papal visit to Spain in 15 years. And the night before, 600,000 young people attended a vigil with him. That is an immense seeking of spiritual connection. It's staggering. And we see that same psychological drive for connection mirrored in secular mass gatherings as well.
Yeah, the box office is booming, specifically driven by nostalgia. A reboot of Scary Movie set a franchise record opening with over $52 million. A reboot of the 1980s Property Masters of the Universe opened to almost $30 million. The year-to-date domestic box office is nearing $4 billion, up over 13% from last year.
People want an escape.
Right. And then there's sports. The U.S. men's national team played Germany in Chicago at Soldier Field as a final tune-up before the FIFA World Cup group stage opens this Thursday across North America.
The anticipation for that tournament is overlapping with the NBA Finals right now, too.
Game 3 is Monday at Madison Square Garden. The Knicks are up 2-0 on the Spurs. You have Jalen Brunson talking to the press about the chip on his shoulder from being drafted in the second round, and Victor Wembanyama facing immense media pressure after a late Game 2 turnover.
And President Trump is attending, which means the NYPD has enhanced security and canceled outdoor watch parties. And amid all this sports fervor, there's also a moment of collective mourning. Stacey King, the three-time Bulls champion and beloved broadcaster, passed away Sunday at 59.
He was such a vibrant, familiar voice for so many people. Mourning a figure like that collectively is another profound way communities ground themselves.
Yeah, it really is. And just to top it all off, we have millions of people across the Gulf Coast, Texas, Louisiana, and Mississippi, braving a brutal physical heat dome this weekend.
Right.
Just waiting for a cold front on Monday or Tuesday, while hoping the El Niño suppression keeps the Atlantic hurricane season quiet.
Yeah, and El Niño is essentially a warming of the Pacific Ocean that creates strong wind shear across the Atlantic. That wind shear acts like a ceiling fan, tearing the tops off of developing hurricanes before they can form.
Oh, wow.
It is a massive planetary mechanism that dictates the safety of millions of local homes.
So, Are we just consuming more entertainment to intentionally distract ourselves from the heavy news? Or is there something deeper happening when millions flock to mass, pack movie theaters for 80s reboots, and gear up for the World Cup?
The psychological mechanism here is much deeper than mere distraction. When you consider the heat domes, the inflation, the geopolitical stress, and the fact that a computer program is now writing its own code at a multi-trillion-dollar scale, the headlines induce a kind of digital vertigo.
Digital vertigo, I like.
They make the individual feel powerless. But when you sit in a dark theater to laugh at a scary movie reboot, you are connecting to an era before smartphones and AI. It's a simpler physical reality.
All right.
When you mourn a beloved local voice like Stacey King with your city, or you gather with over 1 million people in Madrid, you are participating in a shared, tangible human experience. It counteracts the vertigo. It reminds us that despite the algorithms, we're still fundamentally connected by physical presence and shared emotion.
We started today looking at the dizzying heights of SpaceX's $1.77 trillion valuation, powered by AI data centers, and the unprecedented political alliances forming to regulate sovereign-level tech. We explored how the escalation ladder in the Strait of Hormuz directly leads to a squeeze on your household budget, and how communities from remote Indian islands to an arboretum in Ohio are navigating severe physical vulnerabilities. And finally, we saw humanity's incredibly resilient drive to gather, whether for faith, nostalgia, or a Knicks game, to find a grounding relief from it all.
As we navigate this immense friction between our digital acceleration and our physical reality, there's a broader implication we all need to consider. If our artificial intelligence is now writing the majority of its own code while we are increasingly distracted by global conflicts and drawn into collective escapism, who is actually driving the ship of human innovation in the coming decade? Next time you use an AI tool, ask yourself, are you directing it or is it starting to direct you?
That is a thought that is going to stick with me. As the rocket booster kicks in on our digital future, we need to make sure our hands are firmly on the steering wheel. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning, keep exploring, and we will catch you next time.